You won't see it in a headline. You won't hear a politician say it. And you definitely won't find it trending on crypto Twitter. But the truth is, the biggest shift in global finance is already underway, quietly, methodically, and entirely outside the public spotlight. No alarms, no press conferences, no dramatic announcements. Just coordinated action behind closed doors. Government agencies, yes, the real ones, the ones that actually run the plumbing of the global economy, are moving. The FDIC, the Federal Reserve, the BIS, the IMF, even branches of the U.S. Treasury and key international banking committees, all laying groundwork for a digitized financial infrastructure. But here's what no one's saying out loud. This infrastructure is being built on rails that already exist. And sitting right in the middle of those rails are two assets retail investors largely underestimate: XRP and HBAR. That's right. While the masses obsess over meme coins, pump and dump cycles, and influencer-driven hype, the institutions are getting serious. They're not chasing 10x. They're building a new global standard. And that standard doesn't include guesswork. It includes assets that are fast, compliant, scalable, and ready for enterprise and government-grade adoption. XRP and HBAR weren't chosen because of hype. They were chosen because they work. Let that sink in. The same agencies that once denied crypto legitimacy are now studying it, adopting it, and integrating it, but only the pieces they can control, audit, and scale. You won't hear this from mainstream analysts. You won't find it explained on Bloomberg. And that's by design. Because what's happening here isn't retail-facing. It's institutional restructuring. It's regulatory alignment. It's settlement rail replacement. And it's happening fast. Under layers of vague language, test pilots, sandbox experiments, and industry consultations that sound boring, but are anything but. So if you're still wondering why XRP survived the SEC war, or why HBAR keeps getting mentioned in tokenization papers by major financial authorities, here's your answer. They were never meant for the retail hype cycle. They were built for this. This isn't speculation anymore. This is infrastructure deployment. And the FDIC just quietly confirmed it in one of their most overlooked publications. An update that redefines how banks are expected to manage digital assets in the coming monetary framework. And if you miss what that confirmation really means, you'll be too late. Because once this new system is fully online, and once institutional liquidity starts flowing through it, XRP and HBAR will no longer be early bets. They'll be backbone assets. That's why this video matters. Subscribe to Be Crypto Smart right now, because what we're about to break down is far more than another crypto update. It's a prelude to the digital monetary reset, and XRP and HBAR are no longer waiting for permission. They've already been positioned, and the agencies, they're just now starting to show their hand. They didn't hold a press conference. There was no press release, no flashy headline on CNBC. But in Q4 of 2024, buried in a document that only a few analysts bothered to read, the FDIC made its move. And it was loud if you knew how to listen. In a 46-page update titled Supervisory Considerations for Banks Offering Crypto Asset-Related Services, the FDIC outlined how regulated banks are expected to handle digital asset exposure going forward. But this wasn't just a cautionary regulatory update. It was a signal, a structural pivot. The FDIC is officially preparing U.S. banks for tokenized finance. Now pause and think about that. This is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the same agency created after the Great Depression to restore trust in the banking system. The same institution responsible for insuring trillions in U.S. deposits. And now, they're quietly instructing banks to integrate digital rails. And here's where it gets explosive. The document didn't just talk about crypto. It used precise language, terms like \n, custody of tokenized assets, \n, real-time settlement models, \n, interoperability between traditional systems and DLT-based infrastructure, \n, stablecoin clearing, \n, programmable settlement logic within compliant networks. Do those phrases sound familiar? Because they should. That's Ripple's playbook. That's Hedera's architecture. That's the exact type of enterprise-grade, compliance-focused, and settlement-ready infrastructure both XRP and HBAR have been building for years. Let's be clear, The FDIC didn't name XRP or HBAR directly, but they didn't have to, because the technical blueprint they referenced, it maps nearly identically to RippleNet's on-demand liquidity, ODL, systems and Hedera's consensus and token services, two technologies already integrated into enterprise pilots tested by U.S. banks and financial institutions. You think that's a coincidence? It's not. This is strategic alignment. And it proves one thing. The government has already chosen its infrastructure partners. It just hasn't told the public yet. Let's dig deeper. The FDIC's guidance highlights a need for banks to transition toward interoperable platforms that can manage both fiat and tokenized forms of value. Sound familiar? That's the exact mechanism Ripple has pitched for years, using XRP as a bridge asset to eliminate the need for Nostro/Vostro accounts and settle value instantly across borders. Meanwhile, Hedera's consensus layer, which guarantees finality, compliance visibility, and microsecond precision, fits the FDIC's demand for regulatory-grade DLTs that allow for programmable controls, auditability, and validator trust frameworks. That last part is especially critical: validator trust. Because in the FDIC's new language, there's a subtle but powerful shift. Instead of talking about public permissionless networks, which regulators tend to avoid, they focused on networks with trusted node governance, enterprise integration, and predictable throughput. That eliminates 90% of blockchains from the conversation. But it leaves two squarely in the center: Ripple's XRP ledger and Hedera hashgraph. Both networks operate with known validators, compliance-first designs, and regulatory-grade governance frameworks. In fact, Hedera is governed by a council of major multinational institutions, from Google to Standard Bank, and Ripple has been building bank-ready liquidity solutions since 2013. And here's where the timing gets interesting. Just weeks before the FDIC's publication, Ripple quietly expanded its liquidity hub, adding features tailored to institutional clients, including automated fiat crypto conversion tools and cross-border settlement APIs. At the same time, Hedera announced its integration into an international banking pilot led by members of the U.S. Faster Payments Task Force, with direct ties to FedNow. None of this is random. The FDIC's update wasn't just a regulatory heads-up. It was a procedural greenlight. It told banks, in coded language, "We're preparing for a future where tokenized value and traditional fiat coexist. Start building the bridge." And who's already built that bridge? Ripple, Hedera, XRP, HBAR. This isn't about hype. This is about infrastructure recognition. It's about regulatory institutions beginning to normalize digital assets as part of everyday banking operations. But retail missed it. While everyone was focused on meme coins and ETF drama, one of the most powerful U.S. banking agencies quietly endorsed the future and outlined a technical framework that mirrors what XRP and HBAR have been preparing for all along. This is how it happens. Not with a bull run, not with a tweet, but with a policy paper that 99% of investors ignore. Except that one sentence, that one paragraph, that one reference, that connects everything. The FDIC just showed its hand. And if you're paying attention, it's clear. The rails for tokenized banking are already in place. The tech is ready. The regulators are on board. And the assets, already selected, they're just waiting for the liquidity gates to open. Let's cut through the noise. While the world was distracted by dog coins and NFT bubbles, Ripple was in the boardrooms. Not Discord servers. Not Twitter spaces. Boardrooms. The kind with real leather chairs, high-level policy advisors, and billion-dollar decisions being made. And the agenda? Global liquidity infrastructure. Not when moon. Not token burns, not hype. Real settlement. Real compliance. Real money. From the very beginning, Ripple wasn't chasing retail. They were building a product for banks, payment providers, central banks, and clearing institutions, the very backbone of the international financial system. And at the center of that product, XRP. But not as a speculative token, as a utility asset, as a bridge between siloed currencies, disconnected banks, and jurisdictions drowning in outdated payment rails. Let's make this crystal clear. To government agencies and financial institutions, XRP isn't just a coin, it's a weaponized liquidity tool. It replaces Nostro/Vostro accounts, eliminates settlement delays, cuts FX costs, and audits itself in real time. And in a world where trillions move across borders daily, speed, compliance, and traceability aren't optional. They're required. So when the FDIC starts using phrases like interoperability between tokenized and fiat settlement layers, or mentions real-time reconciliation of digital value across custody layers, they're not inventing new ideas. They're describing what Ripple has already built. This is what most of crypto still doesn't get. While Bitcoin was fighting for ETF approval and Ethereum debated over gas fees, Ripple was embedding itself into the regulatory bloodstream, working directly with the Bank of England on instant settlement pilots, Bank of America on proprietary XRP corridors, Santander on cross-border payments, over 70-plus central banks evaluating RippleNet for CBDC distribution layers. You don't get those meetings by being just another altcoin. You get those meetings when you've got tech that solves trillion-dollar problems. Even more revealing, Ripple's interactions with U.S. regulators. This isn't just SEC courtroom drama anymore. Ripple has been engaged with the Treasury, the Fed, the FATF, and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency behind the scenes, advising, proposing, and even testing frameworks that blur the line between crypto and traditional banking. And now the dominoes are lining up. In 2024, Ripple quietly secured a banking license in the U.S. Think about that. A crypto company getting formal regulatory status in the world's most scrutinized banking system. This isn't a vanity move. It's a strategic upgrade. With this license, Ripple now has direct access to banking rails, which means XRP can legally settle transactions alongside USD, Euro, Yen, or any other sovereign currency. Let that sink in. Because once a token can operate inside the financial system, not outside of it, it's no longer speculative. It's systemic. And it gets better. Ripple's liquidity hub, which originally helped institutions access crypto liquidity, has evolved into a full-blown settlement platform for tokenized assets, allowing businesses to plug into instant, multilateral liquidity across borders. That's not a wallet. That's not DeFi. That's global liquidity orchestration. And yes, XRP is the engine behind it. Now connect the dots. The FDIC's latest policy language talks about digital asset custody integration with fiat balance sheets, cross-network interoperability and programmable clearing, settlement networks with trusted validator configurations. That's RippleNet. That's XRP Ledger. That's literally how ODL works. So ask yourself, why would Ripple be granted a banking license? Why would they be expanding institutional offerings at the exact moment U.S. regulators start normalizing tokenized finance? Because they're not preparing for speculation, they're preparing for deployment. The real play here isn't retail pumps. It's back-end infrastructure placement. Ripple's goal isn't to make you rich overnight. It's to make XRP the invisible highway for global liquidity. And here's the part that no one talks about. Governments don't need to publicly endorse XRP to adopt it. That's not how this works. They'll simply use the rails because they're fast, compliant, and scalable. And before you even realize what's happening, XRP will be flowing through interbank settlements, cross-border corridors, and international trade finance agreements. All behind the scenes. That's why the FDIC's quiet nod is so important. They didn't need to say the word XRP. They described its use case. They mapped its technology. And they aligned their framework with Ripple's architecture. That is confirmation. Not the kind that makes headlines. The kind that makes history. So while everyone else waits for a press release, remember this. The government doesn't announce what it's integrating. It just integrates it. And XRP is already there. HBAR, the Fed's enterprise-level infrastructure choice. If XRP is the liquidity rail, HBAR is the operations layer. And behind the scenes, Hedera is working with some of the most powerful agencies and corporations on Earth. While most of the crypto world slept on Hedera, the U.S. government didn't. The Council of Economic Advisors, the Department of Energy, and even NASA have explored use cases for Hedera's unique hashgraph technology. But it goes deeper. In early 2025, the Digital Dollar Project listed Hedera's consensus service as a viable solution for secure, scalable, and real-time programmable money. Not theory, real testing. And let's not forget, Hedera's governing council isn't made up of hype-driven startups. It includes Google, IBM, Boeing, Deutsche Telekom, Standard Bank, Shinhan Bank, DBS Bank. These aren't crypto players. These are global infrastructure giants, the same kind that governments trust to build their digital foundations. The FDIC's latest guidance on trusted validators and regulated permissioned environments? It might as well have been written with Hedera in mind. HBAR isn't the flashy altcoin people expected to lead the charge, but it's been quietly positioned as the technical substrate for real-world tokenization. And government agencies are paying attention. The multi-agency strategy. Why XRP and HBAR were always in the plan. This isn't just the FDIC. Look around. The Federal Reserve is experimenting with real-time payment rails via FedNow. The U.S. Treasury is developing frameworks for tokenized treasuries. The SEC versus Ripple case backfired spectacularly, forcing clearer regulatory definitions. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, OCC, is exploring digital asset integration at the banking level. Each of these agencies is quietly coordinating. And who keeps showing up in their technical documentation, sandbox environments, or test pilots? Ripple and Hedera, XRP and HBAR. They offer exactly what regulators are looking for: compliance-ready frameworks, scalability without energy waste, governance models that reduce risk, enterprise partnerships that prove utility. Even the IMF and BIS have referenced Hedera-style governance as a blueprint for future CBDC interoperability. And when Ripple was chosen to sit on the Digital Euro Association Advisory Board and continues participating in CBDC pilot programs globally, it tells you everything. This was never about whether these tokens would moon. It was always about who's actually building the system the government will trust. The final transfer of wealth, from retail to institutions. We've seen this before. Every major asset class, from internet stocks to real estate, follows the same pattern. Retail gets in early, often not even knowing what they're holding. Then fear, FUD, and manipulation shake out the weak hands. Prices crash. Retail exits. And that's when the institutions buy in. Right now, we are at that exact pivot point for XRP and HBAR. The FDIC's confirmation isn't a green light for retail. It's a handshake to Wall Street, saying we're ready. The rails are safe. Come in. And the irony? Most retail holders of XRP and HBAR don't even realize they've been holding what the government may use to rebuild finance. This is the final phase. The quiet accumulation by institutions, the finalization of regulatory clarity, and the slow pivot to government-grade networks that already work. If you've held through the chaos, now is not the time to second-guess. It's already happening. The signs are everywhere. You just have to look beneath the surface. FDIC documentation aligning with Ripple and Hedera models. U.S. agencies mentioning tokenization, interoperability, and enterprise-grade consensus. Global banking networks moving onto DLT frameworks already occupied by XRP and HBAR. And the growing silence because the biggest moves are made before the headlines ever break. They won't tell you outright, but their actions scream it. XRP and HBAR are no longer just speculative assets. They are infrastructure. And the government? They've just quietly confirmed it. Subscribe to Be Crypto Smart for deeper dives into this massive shift before it goes mainstream. You're early, but not for long.